Welcome to Out of Court and Out of Conflict, presented by Wasinger Law Office.
Hello and welcome to Out of Court and Out of Conflict, your guide to estate law and probate solutions by Wasinger Law Office. Join us today as we unravel legal complexities and secure your family's legacy with experienced attorney Matt Wasinger. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is The Essential Estate Plan, Key Components for Business Owners in Florida. Matt, welcome back. Great to see you.
Great to see you too, Kevin. Thanks.
So why is estate planning particularly important for business owners in Florida?
To a certain extent, it's the same as any other reason why estate planning is important, is how do you want that business to pass down? How do you want your legacy, if the business is part of what you consider a legacy, or your family to take it over? Do you want, friends to take it over? Do you have specific ways you want it sold? That's all important for both regular estate planning and business, because it's another asset, right? It's another piece of the puzzle of your overall estate. And so most people think about their primary stuff, their house, their bank accounts, or things like that, but they just assume the business, is going to be handled in some separate way. But a business, if it's not properly funneled to either go through a trust or into a trust, you end up in probate the same way you would for any other asset. Estate planning for your business is just as important as any other asset that you have, as long as you care how that asset is transferred down to whoever you want it to go to, and in the way that you want it to go down. Otherwise, that leads to probate or big fights and things like that. So it's a key component to any estate plan if you own a business, to ensure that you are taking care of that business in a way that it goes into the trust, or you have some sort of succession plan in place to where it avoids going through a lengthy probate issue and under further scrutiny and conflict.
You don't want to be on an episode of Succession with this, right?
Exactly.
So, people are generally kind of afraid of that word probate. Is the probate process, when it comes to businesses, I would imagine it's probably pretty complicated, maybe even more complicated than a probate process for your personal assets?
It certainly can be. And one of the reasons is when you have business partners that may or may not get along. It's similar in the fact that if, just like a property, if you've got siblings that don't get along and some want to sell the property and some want to hold on to it, and they can't come to an agreement, it's going to increase the length of the probate process, increase the complexity of the probate process, increase the conflict in the probate process. Same thing with a business, except that can be even more complicated, because depending on how the operating agreement's set up, if there is one, there's lots of people that run very successful businesses that have no operating agreement. So you're piecing things together in court on how things should go. There could be business partners that aren't part of the family that now all of a sudden have to deal with the kids of their former business partner, or the spouse. And that's where it gets extremely complicated, because if there isn't a clear determination on how things are going to go, it's going to be a longer drawn out fight, and it's going to be more complicated to resolve.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are the key components of an estate plan that business owners in Florida should consider?
Well, the number one thing is get yourself an operating agreement. An operating agreement, if you don't have one, an operating agreement is basically a contract between the business owners on how, and generally has, and they can be very simple or they can be very complicated and long, but generally speaking, they have items in it about how they're going to handle taxes, how they're going to handle principal places of business, and then most importantly, how they're going to either add partners and how shares are divided, or how they're going to be able to assign those shares and pass the interest to the property, or into the interest of the business down. And the number one thing is, if you have an operating agreement, that'll explain how that should go. Now, where some of those operating agreements fall short is it doesn't state, okay, we've got let's say you have three business owners, and it doesn't state if one passes, it goes directly to the other business owners, or it just says, it's their interest. Then it's going down to their family, right? But if that person doesn't have an estate plan set up showing exactly how their family should handle it, there's another problem. On top of it, what we always recommend is setting up some sort of language in your operating agreement that explains, okay, if someone passes or just wants to get out of the business, here's how we're going to value your percentage ownership. We're going to go get broker's opinion. We're going to go get, an appraisal of some sort, or using, stock market index, depending on what you're doing, to value the shares or your interest in the company. And then it gives the other business partners typically first right of refusal, let's say, for 30, 60, 90 days after that evaluation is done, to determine whether they want to buy those interests back. So then it limits the amount of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, especially if a person's got 3 kids and they all want to be part of the business, or they need to, step up and start doing something in that period of time. A common way to fund the purchasing of or buying out of someone that may be leaving or passed on in the case of a probate and a death is getting life insurance policies. The company will pull out life insurance policies on behalf of each of the members of the business. And so that way, when they pass, that money can be used to buy out whatever interest they have and keep moving forward, or at least, minimize the potential for that to be a long drawn out process. And that's one of the things we recommend is let's focus, and generally speaking, that's called a succession plan. Let's focus on making sure your operating agreement has these specific lists. How are we going to value the interest in the company? What happens when you die? Is it going directly to your family? Does the family have the ability to just step into your shoes and start running it? If not, or someone else, not necessarily a family member, or do the business partners have the ability to buy out your interests? And where are those funds coming from? And how are you evaluating the potential for that sale? Because sometimes business owners are going to disagree on what the value is, right? So you have to have lists more or less in place on, okay, if we're going to go after 2 appraisals, we'll average them. If we can't agree on that, then we're going to go to court and they're going to make a determination, or, whatever. There's a million different variables you can put in there. But generally speaking, operating agreement that outlines exactly how you want the business to go if someone wants to leave, if someone dies, and the process to value that part is key to minimizing the conflict after death.
Yeah. What are there other ways that business owners can protect their business assets, in the event of incapacity or death, along with that operating agreement you just talked about?
There's a million different ways that you can do these things. It really depends on a couple things. One, your business partners, the kind of business it is. And then also, if it's just a family-owned business, then there's all sorts of different more fancier trusts that allows them to put it into kind of an irrevocable trust with a little bit of a hand on the wheel to sell the business slowly over time to their kids or to somebody else. And that then puts the business into an irrevocable trust that allows a little bit of protection from creditors and things like that. Or, there's what they call self-settled trusts, which is essentially like a hybrid of a trust where you still get to be a trustee at periods and then hand it off to a successor trustee. So if you're trying to protect the business and keep it in the family, there's ways to do that with an irrevocable trust. But mostly for most people, I'd say 90% of people, they just need a revocable trust that explains that is going to take over ownership of the business. We'll assign your interest. You own 100% of your business. We're going to assign that interest to the trust. So that way, upon death, your trust is now owner of the business, and whoever's trustee at that point can determine what the best course of action is.
Can you talk about the buy-sell agreement for family-owned businesses in Florida and what the benefits of creating those are?
Yeah, it's a succession plan put in place ahead of time, right? It's a buy-sell is here's what happens. And we touched on it a little bit earlier is, if I die, here's how we're going to evaluate and value my interest in the company, and how the sale of that interest in the company is going to go. That's the simplest version of it. And it can be, like I said, people use life insurance policies as part of the buy-sell agreement to make sure that the money is easily funded. And there's 99 billion different ways to make variables on that buy or sell agreement and how complicated, how simple you want it. But we've got some clients that are just simply, hey, we want this person to have 6 months for the ability to try to buy this company at a value that we expect it to be at this point in time. And if they have first right of refusal. If not, then it's going to my heirs or whomever to do whatever they want to do. So it can be as simple as that, or very complicated if you have multiple business partners, to continue to add language on how things should go. And if this happens, then we do this. If this happens, then we do that. And those can be, extremely complicated or extremely simple, just depending on the business and what everyone's goals are and the overall business structure itself.
We've talked about a lot of different things already on this episode. There's a lot of different options, clearly. What considerations should business owners make regarding succession planning for their business, and how do they choose the right approach? How do you help people choose the right approach?
Well, the first thing we do is when we have people complete their homework, they note whether they have a business or not, or what they feel the value of it is what are your goals? What's your long-term plan with this? Are you a service company like a law firm that, if it's a lot of the clients are very personal to the person that's actually in the firm, it's harder to necessarily put an exact value on the company. Is it something you want to try to hand down or sell? Because sometimes that's easier with the bigger firms that have more consistent revenue and different attorneys in there passing through. Or is it a personal business where you are the primary driver of absolutely everything? It's your business, like some companies such as a interior design business, where it might just be one person and they've got a few staff members, but all the business is relationship based, right? So it's hard to determine what to do and the best way to do that if someone doesn't have a goal of what they want to happen. Do they want the business to continue for as long as possible? Are they willing to make concessions on, okay, here's how I want this to be valued, here's what I want my family to get for the business? Because sometimes you may need to sell the business well before you get to that point if your goals are leaning that way. So goals are the most important thing when we're discussing that. And then after we get to what your overall goal is, then we can start to nail down what the best way to handle the succession of the business is. And like I said, you'd be shocked how many people don't have even a simple operating agreement put together for their business that are very successful. And so we'll start with the operating agreement, and we'll add and we'll change and we'll amend if we need to as we go, and as the business evolves. So depending on where they are in the business and what the overall goal is in the long term, the short term, and everything else is the number one thing that we have to pay attention to.
Man, I started a podcast years ago with two of my buddies, and we had an operating agreement for the business side of things, and we never even made any money. So it's shocking to me that people in that was recommended to me, and we didn't even end up, we never really made anything. So I'm shocked to hear you say how many businesses don't have an operating agreement.
Yeah, they get going. Someone tells them they need to set up an LLC or a corporation to mainly, they're probably a CPA telling them for tax purposes, if they start making some real money and they just start going. It's like anything else. You get busy and like your estate planning. Oh, I'll get to that. And you just never worry about it. And then there's a bunch of other people that have just continued to run their business the way they have, and they've had no problems and they've had no issues, and they've got a couple partners and everyone agrees on what's going. I mean, the court can eventually piece together essentially your operating agreement based on how you guys are running the business month to month.
Okay.
Right? They'll say, okay, you had your partners, like you're the host, you handle all the questions for the interviewer or for the interviewee, and you are handling the actual on-air podcast. This person is doing all the editing, and this person is doing all the marketing, right? And if you guys are, even though if you didn't have something specifically set up like this, these were the kind of functional roles, and we all agreed we owned about a third of it, the court will kind of suss that out based on what is presented to them by the three business partners in court. And then that's kind of the quote unquote operating agreement for the sake of trying to determine how things should go from there. But if you get to that point and the court's having to do all that, that means there's been a problem.
There's been a problem, yeah.
And you're going to be fighting for a while, because that's not even a very simple, in theory, simple business can be a very long, drawn out court process when you're letting a judge needs to decide how everyone is going to get everything split up.
How early do you recommend business owners sit down with you to talk about the plan, the succession plan, the estate plan, whatnot?
If they've got a business that's up and running, I always recommend that they discuss it right away. I mean, there's no reason not to have that set up, especially if you're in the process of setting up the rest of your estate plan, because it's just like anything else. If that, and especially for some families, if that business is the main source of income for your family, you need to make sure that there's something in place to make sure it runs smoothly if you're not there, or at least can be sold relatively smoothly, right? Otherwise, if it just languishes for 6, 9, 12 months or longer, if you're sitting through a probate process and people aren't running it properly, or they don't know the way that it's supposed to go, then you're just devaluing it. Your family's being hurt by the lack of income from it, and you're just creating a bigger issue. So if you have a business that you're actually running and there's any value to it at all, even if it's not a, you can purchase type value, more of a, consistent income value, then you need to do something about that and make sure your succession planning is in place to have it go where you want it to go and keep running the way you want it to keep running.
What is it? When you fail to plan, you plan to fail?
Yeah. Wise words that apply perfectly to business and estate planning.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to Out of Court and Out of Conflict with experienced attorney Matt Wasinger. For more information or to connect with Matt, visit wasingerlawoffice.com, and please like and subscribe to our channel. We love having you be part of our community. Matt, great seeing you again. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos like this one.